In this video, I'm going to do a walkthrough for teachers of Unit 5, Day 19, McCarthyism and the Red Scare. This lesson comes from the Passport to Social Studies book, and I do suggest if you have it to check it out because there's some examples for how to extend the lesson, how to modify the lesson. The documents are really straightforwardly placed in just one space. There's some extra questions too for document analysis, just so kids can get a little deeper. So I do recommend checking out the PDF version, or if you have the paper version of the Passport to Social Studies curriculum for this lesson, go ahead and do that. The documents are all in the slides, but they're also linked into the student workbook, which you can find in Teacher Hub. All right, today's lesson focuses on McCarthyism and the Red Scare. There's going to be a little bit of content at the beginning of the lesson, and then students are going to analyze 4 documents. You can use a jigsaw activity for this, but I do find the documents are incredibly rich, and so you might want students to examine them closely, or examine each one of them closely, or maybe do 2 and share with a partner for the other 2. The focus question is, what ideas and events defined the Cold War? And the lesson objective is to explain the rise of McCarthyism and describe its impact on life in the United States. It starts off with this very interesting film, which is a modern film, but includes a PSA or propaganda from the 1950s about communism. And so as you're watching, there's a few messages in the film, but it's about the fear of communism and extreme propaganda and how it was used to root out communists in America. Of course, students would have a lot of different questions about the film, so give space for that, and maybe you can answer some or have students try and answer each other's. So here's just a couple slides of content discussing that the government used a lot of propaganda and how propaganda reflects the mood of the country. So during the Cold War, it was a fear of communism, and that we did a lot, both politically and socially, to curb the spread of communism at home. And here are some things that students should definitely know. The USSR was using spies, and spies were a real thing. They're not just part of the movies. China became a communist country right at the beginning of the decade, and the Cold War started again right at the beginning of the decade. So these are big events that are happening in American society. So that is what people are thinking about. So the same way that we're thinking about pandemics, they're thinking about the spread of communism. So Joseph McCarthy is one of the key figures of the fight against communism at home. In fact, this time period can kind of be nicknamed the era of McCarthyism. He capitalized on fears of communism by trying to root out communists in the US government. People were mixed on their support of him. Some people were very supportive of him and his work, and some people saw that he was violating constitutional rights. His work, which became known as McCarthyism, was also known as the Red Scare. Really, this is the second Red Scare. The first Red Scare happened in 1918 at the same time as the Russian Revolution, around the World War I and the end of World War I. So that's the first Red Scare. The second Red Scare is 1950s McCarthyism. McCarthy wasn't the only person who was trying to find communists, and the documents that students examine are going to talk about the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, HUAC, which was working alongside McCarthy, or a little bit before McCarthy, to find communists in American society. So while McCarthy was finding communists in the government, House Un-American Activities Committee was finding communists in normal everyday society. And the documents are going to talk about the Hollywood 10, which is actually more than 10 actors, producers, directors who ended up being blacklisted for their associations with communism. So this was really affecting the lives of many people in America, whether they were communists or not. Okay, you're going to use your model here to show students how they're going to work on the documents. This is one of the four documents. So if you are doing a jigsaw, the students for their independent work are left with only 3 documents. And it's a longer compilation of speeches from Senator McCarthy. So, Senator McCarthy, you can also find videos of him speaking as well online. And the question is going to be, what would your reaction to Senator McCarthy's charges of conspiracy and betrayal at the highest levels of government been? This is a opinion question, so I didn't put an answer in for you, but you might add some other questions about understanding the document just to see that your students do understand the document. So once you've modeled it, students are going to get started on analyzing the next 3. However you split this up, there's 1 question for each document. But again, if you want to add another question, you can go ahead and just do that, or you can check out the original lesson, which has some more questions included. These are really great documents. The document 2 is Senator Margaret Chase Smith, who was one of the most outspoken critics of McCarthy. So remembering that he wasn't standing without opposition is important, and she really brings in the freedom of speech and our Bill of Rights and how he violated them. So how did she respond to McCarthy? By accusing him of violating the Constitution. And then it talks about Bartley Crum through his daughter, Patricia Bosworth. Bartley Crum was part of the Hollywood 19. So again, you didn't mention the Hollywood 19 in the slides earlier, but is mentioned here. So if you want to add some context into that, add a bit of context into your earlier model portion of the lesson. It does discuss how the House Un-American Activities Committee had a role in blacklisting Bartley Crum and leading to his eventual, suicide. And the next one is similar. Paul Robeson, who was similarly accused of being a communist. This one particularly focuses on Paul Robeson's race. He was a black man, and so when we're talking about McCarthyism, race is going to play a big role in whether a person was accused of being a communist. People who engaged in friendships with people of other races would often that was like a tell that you could be a communist. So this has similar outcomes as the previous document, but it has the added complication of Paul Robeson's race playing a role in the outcome. So eventually the House Un-American Activities Committee revoked Robeson's passport, but what this question doesn't ask students to get into is how Robeson's race impacted his feelings about communism, which is an interesting aspect of the document itself. Okay, and then students are going to use the documents that they've read through in order to answer this question. How justified were the efforts during the Cold War to identify and root out communists and communist sympathizers? And they need to use evidence. I didn't have an answer here because there are a number of possible answers for this. You should be aware that all 3 documents the students do on their own are really anti-McCarthyism. And the first document is where you're really getting the argument of McCarthyism. And there is no document in this lesson that reflects the House Un-American Activities point of view. So if you wanted to add that, go ahead. And then the wrap-up is a personal reply for students, and the check for understanding is just thinking about how propaganda or things like McCarthyism can be challenged, which you can connect to modern day as well. And it plays a big role in modern day.